and welcome to Cut Through the Noise. Cut Through the Noise is the podcast that helps business leaders increase sales through elevated communications and marketing. I'm your host, Aisling O'Rourke, founder of The Communications Coach, based here in the Republic of Ireland. We work with business leaders who want to speak with credibility, authenticity, and of course, clarity. And you are very welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. If this is your first time tuning in to Cut Through the Noise, whether you're listening or watching, thank you for taking the time out to tune in. I hope you enjoy what we have to offer here. And don't forget, we have an entire back catalogue for you to catch up on if you enjoy today's episode. This is season 12, which is kind of mad when you think about it. I want to thank all of our listeners who have helped to keep the show on the road. Now, this season is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have more of me, and we're focusing in on women in business in particular. More specifically, we're focusing in on voice, visibility, and value. Not confident slogans, not performative empowerment that, all kind of a bit fed up of, let's be honest about it, but practical communication decisions that shape how we are perceived in rooms, online, and in the marketplace. Today's episode is, welcome for all genders, but particularly on helping women finding your voice in rooms that weren't necessarily built for you. And this entire season is aimed at helping you think differently about how you communicate. So if you've ever been talked over in a meeting, interrupted mid-sentence, had your idea repeated by someone else and all of a sudden taken seriously, or felt underestimated before you even began speaking, then this series and this episode is created specifically for you. Let me start with something that I say regularly to my clients. The issue is rarely capability. We are in the positions we're in because we are very capable. The women I work with are highly qualified, commercially astute, they're experienced, they're leading teams and running businesses, advising boards. Capability is absolutely not in question. What is in question, though, is positioning, and positioning is a communications issue. Many of my clients describe the same patterns. They are softening their language, they're over-explaining, they begin with apologies, or they qualify what they're about to say. I just think, or this might be wrong, but. And look, I do it myself on occasion. We've been trained to do this, and the instinct to soften, it comes from experience, whether it's experience in the societies in which we're raised or in the workplace because we've been burnt before. It's behavior that we've learned and developed over years. It develops when you've been dismissed, interrupted, or labeled as being too much, or worse still, difficult. So you slowly but surely over time make adjustments to how you communicate. But here is the challenge. When we dilute our language, we dilute our authority before the idea even lands. Finding your voice is not about becoming louder. It's about becoming more intentional in how we communicate. And that first step is to understand your audience. So before we focus on what you will say, we need to assess three things. Who holds formal authority? Who holds the informal influence? And what decision is actually being decided on right now? These three decisions help us progress, help us move forward. Too often we react emotionally to a room rather than strategically to a decision. And I want to be really clear here because I'm including all genders when I say this. Sometimes we react emotionally without even thinking. Our body language responds before we verbalize anything. So If you understand where power sits, you can then choose to intervene and how to frame your contribution. We need to respond when we're in a business setting in a strategic way. And that just has to become our habit. Secondly, then, we do need to audit the language that we're using. This is really useful for those of you that are giving presentations, those of you that speak publicly. And I know when I say this, I'm going to give some people the ick. It is important to listen back to yourself. I've worked in media now for 20 years, over 20 years, really. To this day, I hate listening back to myself, whether it's on radio broadcasts or TV appearances or even on this podcast, okay? I overly criticize myself. I get it. But when we listen back to ourselves and focus in on the language, the choice of language that we're using, that's a really powerful tool to help us communicate more strategically. And look, if we want to improve, we have to put the work in. So, are you asking permission to contribute? When we're out and about with friends, we might just say, oh, sorry, listen, I have to tell you this, or I know I'm interrupting, but that's not appropriate language for the workplace. It's not appropriate language in a business situation where you're trying to build authority. Are you saying things like, sorry, can I just add something? Or I might be wrong, but, and this is probably obvious. I might be wrong, but is one that I have a tendency to use. I'm going to be totally honest here. And sometimes I choose to use it when I am doubting myself, but I try not to use it all that frequently. We have a tendency to choose to use these phrases because they feel polite, but they position your contribution as being optional or weaker to those who are in the room with you. What we're doing here is we're seeding doubt before we've actually made the contribution. So if you think about that logically, if you're doubting what you're about to say, why should anybody in the room listen to it? Instead, we need to clarify. We need to contribute in a way that portrays confidence, even when we're not feeling it. We might choose to say things a little bit differently, like, I have a different perspective on that, actually. Or, we need to consider the commercial implications. Or, there's a risk here we've not addressed. Or, my personal favorite, I really love those ideas. I actually think they're fantastic. But I do think we need to be a bit more realistic or more practical. What's the minimum viable product here? That has a tendency to elevate your position in a group setting, and it also helps to bring things back on track as well when you know the meeting is perhaps going on a bit too long, or people are coming up with amazing ideas that are just not going to happen. There's no aggression here. There's no apology. There's just clarity. And I think that's the confusion people often make, particularly in Ireland. We do have a tendency to apologise for our very existence, women in particular, but definitely all genders. We start so many sentences with sorry that when we try to sound more confident, we're afraid of sounding aggressive, even though that's light years ahead of where we're actually going to land. So, secondly, it's really important to think about and audit the language that you're using. Then we need to bring some structure into how we're communicating in order to really build authority. Authority is not about volume, it's about coherence. So when we are making a point, we need to use a really simple structure. We need to provide some context, make some point, and then the impact piece comes. Okay? And this is where we might say something along the lines of, look, given the timeline we're working to, I think this approach creates unnecessary risk. The likely impact here is delayed delivery, reputational damage. So you've given your context, you've made your point, and you've really landed at home with some impactful statements. It has to be clear, commercial, and grounded. Because we're building businesses, we're building careers, not hobbies. Structured thinking signals leadership. Now, We have to address interruption. And when I get really enthusiastic about something, I interrupt people myself. I'm very aware of it. I try not to do it. I know for people who are neurodivergent, it's a real challenge. Okay. So being talked over is commonplace. Particularly, I think, actually, since the pandemic. And so many of us were isolated for such a long period of time that in some ways we've forgotten the institutional habits that we may have had in the workplace before. It's particularly common in high pressure, male dominated environments. And it's also, I find, a particular issue in environments where Generation Z is present. Again, this is a cohort of workers who've spent much of their educational periods of life isolated at home, and they're only too delighted to be in an environment with other people, or even if they're not comfortable in that environment, they've not understood or learned through osmosis the things which are considered common courtesy in the workplace. So we need to educate by example and show leadership on this. But here's the thing, for the purpose of conversation today, when we're talked over, the instinct often is to retreat or to escalate, to go from one extreme to another, and neither one serves us. Instead, I would advocate holding your ground calmly. Pause, then continue. Silence actually can be very impactful here. And you might raise an eyebrow when I say this when it's an episode entitled Finding Your Voice. But silence is really powerful if used effectively. So when you're interrupted, pause. Draw attention to the fact that you're not speaking, and then continue on at the same pace. No need to elevate the volume, escalate the speed. Just continue as you have been. Something along the lines of, I'd just like to finish that point I was making. You've said what you're about to do. You're not apologizing. You're not asking for permission. You're just going to complete the point that you were making. Another useful technique here is to reclaim the point you made earlier, particularly when somebody else has just repeated the point that you've made. So you might say something along the lines of, as I mentioned earlier, as I said earlier, you're not fighting, you're just retaining credibility. These are really small steps, but consistency over time builds authority. And there's a wider leadership dimension here. Staying calm, building your voice as a person of leadership, credibility, authority, and the person who you can approach who will respond in a calm, reasoned way, then that means you can be trusted as a leader. And that's worth its weight in gold. If you're already in a leadership role, your responsibility extends beyond your own voice. You do have a responsibility for the welfare of those around you. So it's important that you acknowledge when somebody is interrupted. You pay attention to whose ideas are being credited, that you notice when contributions are minimized, missed, or talked over. It's up to you to actually credit the person who raised that idea originally, or you ask people to allow the other person speak, that you do lead if you are in a leadership position. Communication culture is shaped by what leaders tolerate. So if in a meeting you tolerate somebody going off on a rant, or even saying quite negative and inappropriate things about a colleague, that reflects very negatively on you. And it means actually that you're not the kind of leader who has the team's back. So they won't come to you if there is a problem. It's breaking of the trust. And that means the team will have difficulty working effectively and efficiently together, and it's on you to fix it. Inclusive communication is all too frequently focused on optics. And it's not about optics at all. It's about improved decision making. It's about making sure that you are achieving the goals that you've set out in the first place. Now, we should address the deeper issue here, and it is fair to say that sometimes the room genuinely is not designed for us. Certain industries, boards, senior leadership teams have historically been designed and built for a particular profile. And you can't change that history in one 20-minute meeting, but you can change your strategy. And, was it Madeleine Albright who said there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women? And I know we talk about the glass ceiling an awful lot. We talk about women who are elevated to positions of power, who climb the ladder and then pull up the ladder behind them. We need to think about these things and reflect on whether or not they're fair in our own situation and how we behave. So we can't change history overnight. But it's important to acknowledge that you don't need to mirror someone else's style to be taken seriously, because we do learn by osmosis. And sometimes we mirror another person's style in order to please that person who's in a position of authority, but we forget about the people who are in the position that we were in maybe 12 months ago, 6 months ago, whatever it might be. Instead, we need to find our own voice, build our own composure, and communicate with clarity, competence, and consistency. And that only comes with practice, trial and error. Okay. And this work can become uncomfortable. But in our heads, we need to separate what's discomfort from incompetence. Because as I said at the outside, we know we're competent. We know we are capable. Feeling uncomfortable doesn't mean that you're out of your depth. So I get asked all the time, how is it that you go on TV or you speak on stage and you're not nervous? Because people assume because I stand up and I talk on camera or speak on stage and I smile and I project my voice and I'm confident in what I say, that I'm not nervous. Feeling slightly uncomfortable or nervous or discomfort, whatever word you prefer to use, does not result in the absence of nerves. Nerves are there to remind us that we care about what we're doing, that we want to do a good job. Actually, nerves are a really positive thing, and we need to reframe that in our own minds. Stepping out of our comfort zone doesn't mean stepping out of our depth. It means stretching our comfort zone and stretching into a new position of influence. This week, after you've listened to this episode, I want you to listen to yourself, to observe yourself. Where are you softening unnecessarily? Where are you asking for permission? Where are you retreating, even though you know you should be speaking up? Pay real attention to how you're communicating this week. In order to make any change, we need to be aware of what needs to change. That's why, every Hollywood drama that features alcoholism features some form of 12-step program where the person has to declare themselves as being an alcoholic. I'm not saying for a second you need to stand in a room of people and say, "Hi, I'm shy." That would be ludicrous. But by paying attention to the language that we're choosing to use, the body language that we're choosing to use, it helps us make those small incremental changes that have a major impact. Over the course of this season, we're going to focus on how the voice connects to our personal brand, our storytelling, our visibility, the value that we bring as business leaders, and leadership scale. And it begins here with the decision to contribute without shrinking. If this episode resonated with you today, please do share it with a friend or colleague who you think might find it useful. The whole point of Cut Through the Noise is to help you to communicate with clarity, credibility, confidence, and of course, authority. So if you think someone else will benefit from it, please do share it with them. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Cut Through the Noise. And if you're about to step into a more visible leadership role and want to strengthen how you communicate in high-stakes environments, you can find out more about working with me on thecommunicationscoach.ie. Next week, we're going to focus on personal branding without the cringe, because visibility, when done strategically, is not self-promotion, it's clarity. This series is designed to help you think differently about how you communicate and to give you practical insights that you can apply immediately. If you're ready to work in a more structured and supported way, please do get in contact with me. We run the Clarity Collective. It's a monthly communications mastermind where we tease out these issues and hold each other to account. You can book a call at the link in the show notes below. No pressure, just a chat. And if this is the right fit for you, fantastic. I look forward to working with you further. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Cut Through the Noise. It is a noisy world. Clear, confident and authentic communication is what allows you and your business to stand out from the sea of sameness and cut through the noise. Stay safe and have a great week.